I'm delighted to welcome Rebecca Jacoby as our guest today on the CIO Zone. And Rebecca is the Senior Vice President and CIO for Cisco. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Of course, I should point out to our viewers that we're using the Cisco telepresence system, which, although they may have thought by their first glance that you were here with me in real life, we're actually separated by thousands of miles. But you'd never know it. It's really a wonderful experience. First off, I'd like to ask you about your route to the CIO position, and tell our viewers a little bit about how you got to the very senior position in a technology organization.
The route that I took to the CIO office here at Cisco might be a little bit less than traditional, but it might be becoming more traditional. I have a degree in economics and an MBA. So I don't really consider myself a technologist.
Right.
But I think the role of CIO isn't necessarily strictly to be a technologist, it's to use technology.
Right.
And so I think that is sort of an interesting way to look at it that changes what your background could possibly be in the role. I spent most of my career, I've worked in technology. I worked for technology companies since I got out of school. Getting close to 30 years ago, not quite 30 years ago. And I have worked most of my career in manufacturing and supply chain. I started in a manufacturing role right out of college, process engineering type of a role, and have had different positions in and around the supply chain. Some of them working closely with engineering, doing new product introduction, some of them doing actual production, some of them doing, and most of the time doing sort of planning, manufacturing planning type roles, which happen to be very closely tied to the ERP technologies that we use to run our businesses. So during that time, I became very involved as a business person in the ERP systems and the ERP processes. And when I came to Cisco, it was kind of interesting. We had a leader of manufacturing at the time. His name was Carl Redfield, who was really brilliant about really how can you really use technology as a strategic advantage in the supply chain. And when I was interviewing, even before I came to Cisco, he told me, hey, there's some roles in IT. Would you be interested in them? And I thought, I'm not sure why I would ever be interested in IT. And I thought it was kind of a strange conversation, and I told him, no, I'd rather do this, production. And I came to the company doing that, and I had a couple of different jobs. And Carl actually came back to me and said, I'd like you to take the manufacturing IT applications team on. And I said, well, you know what, I can't imagine that I'm going to be very good at it, so if you want me to do it, I'll do it, but I'm going to stay in, I'd like to stay with some responsibility for something where I actually know what I'm doing, so that I have sort of a grounding here. And so for many, many years, I had the planning role and the IT role, and sort of a combined business IT role in manufacturing here, and that sort of led me to end up being a key individual when we started doing process re-engineering in a big way in the company in 2003. And I left manufacturing at that time, but I still had a business role. And it was really about changing our quote-to-cash processes and those types of things. And somehow, after doing that for several years, John Chambers came to me and said, I'd like you to do the CIO role. And I was very reluctant to do it at first because it didn't seem to me it fit with my background. But we had many long conversations, and essentially it did fit with my background because I think it's critical that you have that operations thinking that is sort of core to me. But John's challenge to me was business is really changing, IT is really changing, and this really requires someone who's a change agent, and that's what you're good at, and we have a big vision for where we need to go with this, and I think you can step up to the strategy side of this, but it's really about change in a changing industry, and so that's how I ended up in the role, and I think that's sort of the salient point for the future of the role is the industry is going through a lot of transitions, And the job now, and I think forever, is going to require people that are comfortable with driving a consistent change proposition for value for the enterprise.
And you were really at the core of a manufacturing business. Right. Anyone who is in a service business, for example, ought to be sort of at the very core of the service business, because if I could sort of translate what you said, if you don't understand the business, where it's coming from or where it might go, what kind of change agent can you be other than doing it by the numbers, as opposed to really understanding the requirements of the business firsthand? Right. So I think you've actually, because of your interesting background, touched on technologies which for the foreseeable future are going to be very, very important, such as analytics, which in the supply chain management area, analytics has been the backbone for more than 10 years, for sure. Right. And now only recently is BI kind of finding its way down into the SMB space and so forth. So again, anyone who's come from...
I can tell you have the IT background, because not everyone jumps to the common thread between supply chain and IT is really data. How you look at data, how you analyze data, how you manage data, and how you develop business intelligence from it. That connection isn't really obvious to everybody, but I've heard it described as a data supply chain. Right. I believe that not just for data, though, but the transition that's happening in the industry is essentially everything in IT, all of the capabilities that we deliver from IT are becoming service-based. If you like, there's a bill of IT of services to deliver any capability you're delivering to the business. And so, and that's things as foundational as, network storage, compute. It's true of the really complex things like data management and BI, which are very, deliver what the business needs the most value from, but very complex to organize. Especially true of these collaboration technologies and these communication technologies, which are really changing the way people interact with technology. So if it's all service-based and we need to deliver that seamlessly to deliver something to our businesses, I sort of look at IT as a supply chain of services that we're able to deliver. And I think the changing role of IT becomes much more how do I assemble the available technologies and services in order to deliver you your capability with the service level, the risk level, the cost level, and, oh, by the way, the time to capability you require. It's not, hey, I'll get back to you in 3 years with my big project. Right. It's, what do you need? How can I assemble it and deliver what you need? And that's I think, the core of the change that is happening in the IT industry today. So I do think that operations background is very, very important. But the other thing I would say about being a change agent is change is about people. Absolutely. Okay. And that's the hardest thing to change. Your organization and your people. Without exception, when I talk to my organization and I have like an all hands or some kind of a virtual event, I always get asked the question, okay, what's the number one thing we should be working on right now? Well, now when they ask me, I just say, the answer to this, right? And it's communication. Right. And so these technologies, these communication technologies, are really key to how rapidly and how effectively you can drive change in organizations today. Without a doubt. And so, that's another big change that happens in the IT role today is this has been converging over the last 10 years, but the understanding of how the communication processes fit together with the business processes is a very, very key element to how do you actually take these technologies and a lot of the technologies that are in big transition today, they've been around for a little while. They're not like brand new last week. Right. And some of them, they're not 20 years old, but they're 3, 4, 5 years in the making. And so, it's not really just about is the technology available, it's how can it actually be brought into the realm of use in business for value. And so, bringing the communication technologies and the business process technologies together are very, very important in terms of the way we view our jobs in IT today.